Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Gaming with me, Tony Mo, and we are here today to talk about what we know regarding Homefront: The Revolution. Now, just today, as I'm recording this, we actually received a official release date for The Revolution. It's going to be coming out May 17th of this year in the States and May 20th in Europe. They are also going to be launching a beta for Xbox One first in February. I will have a link down in the description below if you're interested in signing up for that. It's free. Just go sign up and you'll have an opportunity to beta test this game come February. Now, before we actually talk about The Revolution, I feel it's important that we talk about its path over the last 5 years, its development, its publishing cycle, and the big ruckus and mess that the Homefront franchise has been involved in since the release of the original game. Now, the original Homefront took place in 2027. Homefront: The Revolution is going to be taking place 2 years after that. The big thing about Homefront when it came out was it was a game that decided to take things home for those of us who live here in the States. Rather than a World War II setting or going across seas like we always seem to be doing, for once, our homeland, the States, America, was actually under attack by what was known as the Greater Korean Republic. It was a cool and different setting, but the game really didn't sell that well. Now, the original was actually developed by a studio known as Chaos Studios. They were owned by THQ. Chaos Studios ended up being closed down by THQ, and then THQ shortly after that filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, meaning that they would then have to start the process of selling off all of their assets and intellectual properties at auction. Crytek would then acquire the rights to the franchise for what is claimed to be, this is US dollars, $544,218. That's not really a lot of money for a video game franchise. It's obvious that no one really saw a lot of worth in it, but Crytek wanted something to do with it. On top of that, shortly after the acquisition by Crytek, Deep Silver would also announce that they were going to help co-publish the game with Crytek. They had also acquired properties from the THQ bankruptcy auction. So at that point in time, we've got Deep Silver working alongside Crytek to develop and publish what would be the next entry in the Homefront franchise. Crytek was very excited about this. Crytek designer Fashahat Salim was actually quoted saying that when we acquired the IP, we all of a sudden realized we had the freedom to take the game wherever we wanted, because THQ had nothing to do with it, and THQ previously wanted the game to have a linear format because THQ was boring, and that's why they went bankrupt, like the original game. At this point, Crytek decided they were going to take the game open world, and they were going to set it in Philadelphia. Awesome, right? Crytek's got great plans for the game. Sadly, there's a bunch of financial issues that start affecting the development of the game. Crytek's having problems everywhere, and on July 30th, 2014, they announced that due to an internal restructuring, they would then sell the Homefront intellectual property to Koch Media, which is the parent company of Deep Silver. So at this point, Deep Silver now has the rights to the game, and they have to deal with publishing and developing it. They hand it over to Dambuster Studios in Nottingham, who starts work on the game, and it brings us to today. Dambuster Studios is the developer of Homefront: The Revolution, and the game is being published by Deep Silver. Yeah, it came a long way. Cool thing is it's still using the CryEngine, which I think is awesome. I think the CryEngine produces some really great looking games, and you're going to see some sort of shared ideas, I think, from Crysis when we actually start to talk about The Revolution. So let's do that. Now, the game is going to be launching on all platforms. They have plans for a Windows release, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and there are even plans for an OS X Mac, that is, of course, and Linux build. Not sure when that will happen or if that will happen, but right now you can expect it to launch on the console as well as on Windows PC. So, what is going on in Homefront: The Revolution? As I said, it takes place 2 years after the events of the original Homefront, so it's going to be taking place in 2029. This is 4 years into the invasion of the United States by the Greater Korean Republic. So basically, the original Homefront, we lost. And Korea, the Greater Korean Republic, now occupies the United States. Everyone who lives underneath them is oppressed. It's just one giant ghetto. And the game itself is then going to take place in Philadelphia. So that's going to be the focus of the game. We've got an open world area inside of Philadelphia. I love the idea of that. I love the idea of the game is, once again, something taking place here on on my home state, on my home, you know, turf. It's a change of pace, man. Like, first-person shooters, military and otherwise, have just been doing, you know, things that follow the history, or the Germans are always the bad guy and we're always over there, blah, blah, blah. You know, it's nice to have something a little bit different. Not saying it's completely original, but it's cool. It reminds me a lot of Freedom Fighters, which is why I was so intrigued by the original Homefront. Freedom Fighters to me was a fantastic game that definitely needed to see more entries. I thought they could have just went everywhere with that. Same kind of idea, except it was Russia invading New York City back then. Anyhow, you're going to be in Philadelphia. The big focus of this game, right, is that you are part of a resistance movement that is greatly overpowered and outnumbered by the Koreans. The Koreans have crazy technology. They've got drones. They've got, you know, it's insane. You're living in this crazy police state that is ran by some people with some seriously high-tech equipment. It's at this point that you are part of this resistance and you need to rebel against them. So let's talk kind of about the core game, right? We don't know too much about the story. That's basically what we know. There's some character stuff we could talk about, but I don't feel that's important. What I want to talk about is the open world sandbox that they're trying to create with Homefront: The Revolution, because I think this is what the game is going to revolve around. And when you're watching the gameplay footage, you can kind of see the focus, the emphasis on this. It's not supposed to be a linear experience. It's really about going out in the open world, taking advantage of the sandbox, the tools, and then tackling different situations as you see fit. That is like, sign me up. I love stuff like that. I love it when it's pulled off really well. I love when they give the player all the right tools and the world design is on point, and then that's when you get those really great moments. It's the kind of game that I think just watching it won't do it justice. We saw a lot of gameplay from the developers, some walkthroughs at E3. They were obviously limited to what they could do because of the development cycle of the game. They can't just give it all away. And while I was watching the developer play it, and even in some of the footage you see here, this stuff's a little bit more set up, you can tell. You know, it's kind of just like, you know, I wouldn't have done it that way. You know, that doesn't interest me. I would have done it this way. Look at the tools he has. Oh, I would have done this. That to me is the sign of what could be a great sandbox game. When you watch someone play it, and you're not like upset that they did it that way, but you're starting to think about how you would do it. Like how you would use those tools to complete that objective. That's what a sandbox experience should be about. So I'm hoping they can really nail that in the Revolution. And the idea is to give the player a lot of tools to do that, right? There's a big focus on ambush and guerrilla warfare style tactics. And that's just the way it has to be. When you're that overpowered and just outnumbered by an enemy force, you're gonna have to use guerrilla tactics. You can't stay and fight a group of enemies. They're gonna call in some crazy drone APC. You've got to get in and get out, you know, capture your objective, use intel and deception and sabotage to make sure that you can do what you need to do to succeed in the end. I love the idea of that. I love the idea that you're gonna have these areas on the map. Again, definitely inspired by a lot of other open world games. Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, I think, kind of set the precedent for the idea of an open world sandbox design. And at the forefront of that is always capturable points, like areas on the map that when you capture them, they like relieve oppression, or they help, you know, kind of change the pace of the fight or the battle. That's very much here in Homefront. You'll see that in the footage here. You know, going and capturing different key points that are currently controlled by the Koreans, and then bringing them back under resistance occupation. That's okay, right? I'm fine with that. I can deal with the idea of that. I think what's going to make it fun is how you can go out and actually engage those objectives. That's what made Far Cry so much fun. Same thing with Assassin's Creed. You know, you really had to go out of your way to like think to yourself, okay, how can I do this? You know, I can do this as boring as possible. I can just go in, kill everyone, and leave. Or I can, you know, wingsuit off that building, get a triple stealth kill, shoot that guy with the bow, blow up the car, drive away. Like, it's about that. You know, that's what they're trying to do here. Now, outside of all the cool little gadgets and tools that you're going to be able to get along the way, the weapons, of course, are at the forefront of any first-person shooter experience, and I love what they're doing with the Revolution. They have this full weapon customization system that allows you to adapt and add parts and pieces to your weapons on the fly. A system that, when you see in the footage here, is very, very reminiscent of the weapon customization from Crysis, and I'm okay with that. I love the idea of being able to pick up DOP sights and different optics, slap an ACOG on, change out my barrel, you know, make it a sawed-off, put dragon breath rounds in it. That was one of the things that we saw at one of the E3 walkthroughs. In a first-person shooter, the weapons are almost the main character. They're almost more important than any of the story characters, the story itself. And if they're not handled well, then the rest of the game is going to suffer. So I like what they're doing here. The gunplay doesn't really have me sold yet. I don't know how I feel about it. I definitely need to get my hands on it to see, you know, if it actually feels good, but... You know, I like what they're doing with the customization, at least. It feels very Resistance, picking up pieces, kind of just mangling together your weapons, doing whatever you can to make yourself as effective as you possibly can be. And of course, it's all under the beautiful creation of the CryEngine. Now, there's one last big thing that we definitely need to talk about. And that is, of course, how will you be playing this game? It does have a full single-player campaign, but... they also are going to have an online cooperative component that's going to allow you to form a Resistance cell with your friends and do your own thing. Now, they haven't really specified on this. We don't know if it ties into the single-player campaign or if it's a separate component, but military sandbox, guerrilla warfare, Resistance fighters with my friends, you kind of have me sold there. And those are really the core reasons that I've been so attached to the Revolution. Admittedly, I don't think it's going to be a game that blows everyone away. I don't know that it's going to be a game that we remember down the line. But it does look like a lot of fun. It looks like it has the potential to be a great cooperative play with your friends experience. And sometimes that's all a game needs to succeed, is to give you the ability to hook up with your friends and just have a ball. Fingers crossed for Homefront the Revolution. It's been through a long and crazy development cycle and publisher cycle and just every sort of hoo-ha business issue that a game could ever see during the course of development. Usually when a game deals with the same sort of situations that Homefront the Revolution has dealt with, it either never comes out or it comes out and it's rubbish because of it. I think the game's looking pretty good. You know, it looks pretty well put together. Luckily, we're going to have the opportunity to experience it when that beta launches on February. Hopefully, it won't be under NDA. I will very much check it out here on the channel. The game has me intrigued. I definitely would keep an eye on it. That's the least you can do. See what people say about the beta, and then see what happens come full release. It may just be the next best co-op experience for you and your buddies. If you guys have any other questions for me, if you'd like to share your own thoughts about the Homefront franchise or Homefront the Revolution, feel free to leave it down in the description below. If you remember Freedom Fighters, give me a shout. Yeah, Freedom Fighter Bros Unite. I will see you guys in the next one.